Okay.
I have a representative pro se counsel for the 71 defendants that you've seen on the complaints.
Plaintiffs.
Plaintiffs, I'm sorry, that we've seen on the complaints that we filed with you. This is my co-counsel, Albert.
Albert Crushwitz,
Okay.
38 Katy Avenue.
Okay, good afternoon.
ARUSCHWYEZ. Crushwitz.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Susan Avery, Your Honor, for the town of Hampton. I also have Attorney Annie from Office here today.
Good afternoon. Okay, so we are here on a motion to dismiss. I will hear from the town first, since it's their motion, and then I will hear from plaintiffs in response on the legal issues. This is scheduled for 30 minutes. I know we have a late start, but we'll be able to do the full 30 minutes regardless of that. So I will be mindful of time because I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity. Certainly, I have the benefit of everyone's pleadings, but I do find it helpful to hear the arguments from people in person. So, all right, so you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will try to be mindful of time as well and not repeat too much of the arguments that are in my pleadings. And I invite the court to ask additional questions if you feel like I have to do more analysis on that.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'd like to start with the claim related to the municipal-wide reassessment request that's in the petition. As the court knows, this matter has been brought to the PTLA already. The document was in our meetings. That case is actually currently ongoing. There is a hearing scheduled, I believe, on the 11th of February. This is in the beginning of February for continuation of the request for a municipal-wide reassessment. I bring that up because part of the request in the complaint is that this court order a municipal-wide reassessment or order the town of Hampton to perform certain tasks related to a municipal-wide reassessment as they disagree with the 2024 reassessment. Laid out in the statutes and our meetings shows that that is not properly here before this court, that the statutes clearly provide that a municipal-wide reassessment request belongs to the PTLA. It's there. If we have another proceeding here in this court, we can end up with conflicting orders, and this matter is already being addressed. Would the court like me to go into some of those additional statutes that are?
I'll let you argue whatever points you wish to. Okay.
I'd like to move on to the individual abatement requests on behalf of all the petitioners listed. As I indicated in our motion to dismiss the amended complaint, there are only a limited number of petitioners that actually filed a tax abatement request with the town of Hampton. Under 676-16 and 676-17, in order for this court to have subject matter jurisdiction over an appeal for the tax abatement denial, they have to go through the process. They must file with the select board by March 1st of the year. And then if the select board either does not act or denies their request, they become a person aggrieved, they must file their complaint with this court by September 1st. Only the listed people in the amended motion to dismiss actually filed any type of abatement application. Two of them were granted, at least in part, and then the remainder of them were denied. I would like to point out to the court, at least in this preliminary stage, that no specific value, market value for any of those properties was set forth in those abatement applications. So whether or not they're a person aggrieved, if you just ask the select board to abate your taxes and you're given an abatement of some kind, and you haven't received, let me say this again, if you received an abatement of some kind and you haven't, say, requested a reduction of $20,000, and the select board gets an application saying, please just abate your taxes, and they give you some amount of abatement, I question whether or not you'd be a person aggrieved under the statute, but I think that's a matter for us to potentially address after we get through this proceeding. I think my understanding of some of these things has grown as additional pleadings have been filed in this case. I want to address the reference to the 16th Amendment of the Federal Constitution. That claim, or excuse me, that constitutional provision is only for income taxes. It does not govern property taxes. The U.S. Supreme Court addressed the 16th Amendment in a case, that came out in June of 2024. That case is Moore versus the United States. And the request in that case was to find that a mandatory repatriation tax, basically shareholders of a foreign corporation were being taxed on the income that was coming into that foreign corporation because it was determined to be the income of the shareholder. And the shareholder said that a claim that you couldn't tax that because this is an unrealized gain. The United States Supreme Court did not actually reach the question for income tax about whether or not realization is required before taxation. But I make this distinction to point out that the realization question for income has not been decided, but none of this applies to property taxes. So any claims in the federal constitution of the 16th Amendment don't apply. From my reading, I don't gather any additional information about what the RICO, frauds, or conspiracy claims may be related to. As this court knows, there's a scientific requirement for claims such as fraud. They have to be pledged with particularity. There's no factual support in here. I would ask this court to dismiss those claims on the basis that they haven't met the standards for the pleading. I was reading their objection to my motion to dismiss the event, and it missed the amended complaint.
Do you want that?
And some of the additional information that they filed for the amended complaint. And the petitioners are initially started out to be claiming what I thought was disproportionately. As the court knows, under Part 2 of Article 5, the New Hampshire Constitution allows taxation. It specifically has given the legislature the authority to, quote, impose and levy proportional taxes on residents, which is where this claim comes from. RSA 75(8), the legislature has given that power to the municipalities to impose proportional taxes. And the courts in New Hampshire have interpreted that to mean the whole market value of the property. Numerous times the New Hampshire Supreme Court has issued orders on this. In Roe versus Aaron, the court said each taxpayer's property must be valued at the same percentage of its true value as all the taxable property in the taxable district, and shall be valued within a reasonable time before the tax is assessed.
For those on WebEx, please be sure to mute your line, okay? Please proceed.
In Rollins versus Jover, this is, I'm sorry, I should have been listening off the citations. This is 90 from New Hampshire, 4.8. The court said, again, in comparing proportionality, say if someone doesn't pay their fair share of the tax, in response to whether someone's paying for the taxes, it says, as any payment of less than his share leaves more than their share to be paid by his neighbors, his non-payment of his full share is a violation of their constitutional right. So we've not only recognized this as the ability for the municipality ability to tax based on that proportionate tax on market value, which has been down to proportionate value. But that if someone does not pay their fair share of tax, they're also violating their neighbor's constitutional right to only be charged a proportionate rate. It appears to me that the argument here is not about proportionality, but about how property values are determined in the taxing system. That is not. The New Hampshire Supreme Court has repeatedly that this is the constitutional way to tax properties. They must be taxed at an equal percentage of the market rate. The New Hampshire Constitution requires proportionate taxation and property taxation. We use the market value to determine how that, to make sure that everyone is taxed proportionally. From what I can see in the opinion from the petitioners, they're not arguing that these petitioners' taxes are disproportionate to their neighbors, or that they're paying more necessarily. They're talking about they shouldn't be taxed based on unrealized gains. So they should only be taxed on their property value as it was when they purchased the property, and that it shouldn't change. And I'm happy to understand if your position is different than that. But that's what it seems to me that that's the argument that seems to be making. And that flies in the face of the New Hampshire Constitution, as I said, under Article 2, Article 5. So, to the extent we're not arguing proportionality, those claims should be discussed based on long-standing case law from the New Hampshire Supreme Court. If they are based on disproportionality, then they have to follow the procedures as set out in RSA 76, and 16, and 17, in order for this court to have subject matter jurisdiction over those. At most, we may be looking at seven petitioners, but there's 14 petitioners. For 2024. And let me just address that, because the amended complaint also has 2025 in. And I know I haven't filed any of the documents, because it's just a motion to dismiss. What the court knows, so it says applications for abatement of taxes for 2024, and some individuals wrote in 2025 as well. These were all filed before the deadline, which was March 1st, 2025. For the 2024 taxes, no tax bills in 2025 went out, and the tax rate for the assessed values are set until April 1, because April 1 of the year, the tax bills are sent out to be due in July. So these tax abatement applications can't stand in for the procedural requirements in RSA 76 to allow the tax abatement to be ordered because in order to file, even with the select board, it requires that the person be agreed. If you haven't received a tax bill and you haven't been taxed for that year, you can't be agreed for that year. So whatever continues on for this point, from my perspective, would be for but I do want to reiterate that to the extent there is a request for an invisible liability assessment, or I know that there are many people here today on the board Hampton residents, and we're only talking about Hampton. So from the perspective of that claim, this is not the proper form for that to be applied. The statutes laid out in the motion to dismiss describe that it needs to go to the utility. There are actually, as I mentioned, petitioners, there's at least 50 petitioners who signed a petition, filed it with the utility, and requested the utility to take a look is an order that I believe that was almost filed. It's a preliminary order, more than additional to the BCOA is not actually made any findings in that case for what the Hampton NH changes.
This is the 43-page report.
Yes, there's a 43-page order.
And
And there's 37 pages on the order itself.
all right, thank you. I don't have that report. I do have a couple of questions I'll ask about it.
I want to be mindful of time. A lot of it is our opinions, and I want to, go from the petitioners, I don't understand the position more, and what they,
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Joanna. Yes, I understand everything that the town attorney is saying, and it's the same exact, it is, statutes thrown in our face. It's not, this is the way it is, the statutes regulate. Well, no, folks, it's not the way it is. We are private citizens. We are being unfairly taxed. I'm going to introduce my neighbor, my co-counsel, who's also a retired engineer, and he has proved it all mathematically, disproportionality, as well as other things that we found wrong, which is why we're in this court, because we know this Washington Superior Court has talked about disproportionate taxes and unconstitutional taxes. They made a decision with Sorrell versus New Hampshire. So I am also very respectful of your time, Your Honor, and I want to recap everything that we have already filed on behalf of the plaintiffs of Hampton. The town of Hampton selectmen argues that the court lacks jurisdiction to order relief sought by the plaintiffs and cites lots of statutory law. The town argues plaintiffs lack standing to object to unfair, disproportionate taxation in the town of Hampton. The town also argues plaintiffs lack factual support and the plaintiffs' relief sought violates separation of powers. And, I am not a lawyer, and I'm the first to admit that. So based on her concerns with how we added relief to you, we have updated that for the court today and what we're asking from this court specifically. Plaintiffs remind the court and the public that Sorrell versus New Hampshire was a Rockingham Superior Court case regarding unconstitutional disproportionate taxation. A finding in that decision stated that without a full evaluation of statewide property, there cannot be an equal and proportional base of property values on which to assess a tax, and no guarantees of equal valuations of property across taxpayers. So my question is, would that not be the same for inside of town? The BTLA report that's been referenced by both sides, 43 pages, the subsequent hearings in February 11th. Within that report, the Board of Tax and Land Appeals. Now, the whole premise of that was 50 taxpayers got together. They wanted another revaluation because of what they found at the time on the 24th. So that's not what we're asking for at all. That was a separate issue. It definitely applies to us, and it definitely verifies plaintiffs' concerns with some of the property data collection processes that occurred for the 2024 revaluation. In addition, statutory law cannot supersede federal constitutional law. It's the supremacy clause. Now, we may not be talking about income tax, property tax, it's tax. And for a government to think that it can tax someone for something that it never saw is wrong. It's taxation without representation. We're coming up to our 250th anniversary, 1776. This is what their country has been founded. So, and the state statute 75:1 as written allows, as counsel has stated, these assessments to be based on market value. Well, in the data that we provided to the court, and Al is going to reiterate for your honor, we have found that even if you were to take the market values to use for proportionality, that some they're not the same percentage. And not only did we find that, but the Board of Tax and Land Appeals in their findings specifically states that the 2024 reassessment, however, indicates some regressive tendencies, which assesses lower valued properties at a greater percentage of their market value and higher valued properties at a lower percentage. Regressive tendencies create disproportionate tax burdens on those who cannot afford it. Now, let's remember, we go back to 2024, forget about 25. We went from about 65 to 66 million in taxes for Hampton, up to almost 75 million rates, an increase of almost 9 million, or 13.4%. Townwide assessed values increased 54%. So either way you look at it, it's a huge jump. And based on the data that we looked at for almost about a year now, over a year, and verified with some of the findings from UTLA, which we look forward to that February 11th hearing. But the problem is, we started going to the selectmen in November. The abatement process, I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's not going to work because the abatement process is all arguing that market value, which is not a real number. You have not sold, there is no market value. Market value has been redefined in statute 75:1 to be an assumed number that they're taxing you on. So the current process is insufficient to maintain, to be equitable. And the people that did file an abatement, I know one of the concerns brought up by council was that the assessed value amount didn't reflect the abatement amount. Well, what we did was that triggered another little audit, formal audit, for those of you who don't know. And out of the 290 properties that we viewed, the 70 for the plaintiffs, an additional sample of 220 that Al did on his own time, going through the field cards and all that, 28 of those, which is just under 10%, and I do have a copy for town council if you're interested. Their warrants for 25, whether it be the July warrant or the December warrant, the biannual, they don't agree to the field card. So I've talked to a few realtors, and usually when they go to a property, they're not going to go to the town warrant, they're not going to go to, the spreadsheet put together by MRI for the revaluation. They're going to go to that field card. And we found just in our sample alone that field card's not updated to reflect the current assessed value. So like I said, it was 290 sample, and it ended up just under the 10%. According to DRA, there was an assessment review in Hampton in 2023. As of today, the results are not posted. However, plaintiffs have proved mathematically that the 2023 standards of monitoring local assessments, which I also have if anyone's interested, appear to be a concern going into the future for certain properties. Plaintiffs have also proven that several standards of the monitoring local assessments as published by the DRA on April 14th, 2023 have not been adhered to by the town in their 24 and 25 processes. Property maps, this one was done by the plaintiffs. The town map on the town website has not been updated since 2013. So this was done by us, and it shows how the different parts of town got taxed differently. Yeah, so I'm gonna let you step up and just go on this right now. I think that'll be good.
I am a professional licensed engineer in Massachusetts. I worked with the Bell system for 40 years, 18 as an engineer and 22 as a production engineer. I know what the computer assisted programs are, I dealt with them in those years, so I understand maintenance. So to implement statistical appraisal process in practice is not very easy for residents to understand, much less is math involved. Physical appraisal terms like ownership history, land information, building measurements, construction quality, etc., have been replaced with statistical terms like mean, median, grade ratio, weighted mean ratio, average absolute deviation, coefficient of dispersion, coefficient of variation, etc. The town did not make it easy for us to understand switching tax practices. Simple things like equivalent rates for old rates and new rates were not provided. I had to develop them from reading other information in DRA. So that it's very difficult for a resident to do their own assessment of the tax increase portion. So I have to skip over some of my presentation just to get some information on a table proportionality. So I have to recite articles written by Barbara Reed and Catherine Heck, both for government finance advisors, and I quote, "Through revaluations and updates, assessors strive to ensure that property within a municipality is appraised proportionately as required by the New Hampshire Constitution, so that each property owner bears their appropriate share of the property taxed on the value of their property, no more, no less." Proportionality has a simple formula: old assessment times old tax rate equals new assessment times new tax rate. Or in another way, old assessment by old tax times old tax rate divided by new assessment times new tax rate equals 1. So the price-related differential for a person's property should equal 1. And I have to state, it's almost impossible that I think that can be achieved, being an engineer. Looking at all those things I mentioned above as far as conditions of the old tax system, there's just too much in the equation, which they call it AVM, to come up with a one valuation between properties. So the town challenged the MRI industry to do a 100% or 99% statistical measurement for market value to assessment. And I have to say they did it. But that did not give proportionality in the PRD form between residents. Far from it. So I have a listing of all the spreadsheets here that I use to do that calculation. I guess I'm going to run out of time before I can even go through all of them. But basically, it says you take the 1.54 appraised differential between the new assessment and old assessment. You multiply that times your old tax assessment, and then you now take a look at your new tax assessment, and the difference is proportionality. If it's too much, then you're over proportion. If it's too little, you're under proportion. So I have information here to show that the amount of properties that were done in the sample was 220. 74 were above 1.03, which is the New Hampshire law for PRD. 55 were equal. 91 were below. And for everybody's information right now, it's just against the law to be higher than the 1.03, which is unfair overtax, or below the 0.98, which is not paying as much tax. I don't think a lot of people here really understand that. And you can do it by a simple calculation of tax on your own property. You use the equalization factor the town uses in the statistical appraisal, abatement, and you just multiply your old tax rate times 1.134, and then you subtract that from what your new tax is, and you'll find out that difference is not proportional, and by far. So it creates extra revenue for the town, for which I don't know what they use it for, but it totals about $5 million across the whole town. And that information I can produce in the document.
And today our focus, and I understand that the context is important, and the issue is very important to every single person in here. The issue I have to address first is the motion to dismiss and whether or not it's proper jurisdiction. So I appreciate that information. I think that context is important, but I want to make sure that if there's any other arguments regarding the issues raised in the motion to dismiss, I definitely want to make sure we get to that.
Frankly, I'm the math end of it, so
I can tell you're the math end of it, and I appreciate that. You have clearly dug in deeply into all of this.
So, as I referenced earlier, Your Honor, plaintiffs remind the court that Sorrell versus New Hampshire was a Rockingham Superior Court case regarding disproportional unconstitutional taxation. Findings, I said that, in addition, statutory law cannot supersede federal constitutional law. The reason why we are here, Your Honor, today is because we tried to go through the selectmen, and similarly, as town council has said, file an abatement, file an abatement. The abatement is not addressing the issue. The actual property data we found in our work and and has been reflected in what some of the BTLA found, is that the data is not accurate. And we proved that, and that's why we started this whole quest. That's why Al went in, because we were finding that just our people that were interested in this, they were, I'm like, everyone, go get your field card, compare it to your property. And a lot of that was wrong, and the further we dug, the more we find out was wrong. And when we asked, as part of our initial request, we did a 91A to the Board of Selectmen to get some items from the 2024 revaluation. He used to have all the regular things, but we also asked for some other things, and in that we found that the records don't appear to be updated properly. And when we asked MRI what resources they told to come up with the values for the homes that did it sell, you know, they pretty much told us that, oh, well, if there was a sale in the neighborhood, that was taken into account, obviously square footage and all that. Other things that were brought up as part of the BTLA hearing was that the class codes and things like that weren't proper. That's all documented into that 43-page report. I referenced it in a previous motion to you. That's the issue. The issue is that if we can't go to the selectmen, we tried to explain it all to the governor, and now we're saying we can't come to the court. Where are we supposed to go?
I think the argument is that you need to go to BTLA first, and then you can come to the Superior Court after making a record there.
But the problem with going to BTLA is they're not going to be able to address the Constitution. They're just talking about how everything's based on market value, and that you can't tax people in New Hampshire on income. Oh, and you know what I didn't tell you that I want to tell you? The New Hampshire law has it now, and because people don't understand and they go vote on these things at town meeting, they actually classify all single-family homes the same way that they would do a single-family home as if you had an accessory dwelling unit on it and you're bringing in income. So parts of the neighborhoods that we saw throughout the town that had, like, for example, our neighborhood specifically, we're about a quarter of a mile to the ocean. We have Boys Head, which is on the water, classed in the same neighborhood as us. So they can see the ocean, we can smell it. This is all part of the process that we've gone through. And what we're asking for is the court to affirm that there are issues here that maybe you don't rule on them, but you need to know about and see at the end of the day whether or not you feel like the taxation that's being done to these people in Hampton that have been paying taxes, some of them, for 20, 30, and 40 years, and they're being forced out of their home, and they're being taxed as if they sold it, and perhaps as if they're being taxed as someone who has an accessory dwelling and that they're renting out, and they're not. But they're being taxed the same way, according to 75:1, and additional things they've done in the State House over the past several years, and towns pass them through, because most of the people that show up at the town meeting, if they don't understand it, they might vote no, but if they see that planning board yes, selectmen yes, then that, and they don't really know what they're voting on, because as a former selectman, I can tell you that those warrant articles are very difficult to understand. So that's where we are, Your Honor, and I just want to say I appreciate it. And in closing, I do want to say that I took town council's suggestions the way I asked for things. I probably did do that wrong. And in closing, seeing that there seems to be no state or local official concerned enough with the concerns of the plaintiffs to inquire of the judicial branch, it is up to the public as a representative body of all those suffering to do that. This is what it says in our Declaration of Independence. If the government is not doing their job, we are to come and seek the relief ourselves. Because of the disregard.
I want to make sure that I get all of the arguments in that I can hear, and I appreciate why you clapped, but it is a court hearing, and so I'll just give that I'll give that advice. I don't want to call it a warning because everyone's been so quiet and so respectful, which does not surprise me at all, but I do appreciate there's a lot of people. It's getting hot in here.
Yes.
Continue on.
I do want to say that we all respect this court, and that's why we're here. Because of the disregard by the selectmen and then the governor, plaintiffs have suffered substantial monetary damages and a due justice before another town meeting of appropriations and another year of gluttonous spending by the town of Hampton. Another town meeting without any resolve would be unacceptable. So I know we were here on the motion to dismiss, and you've gotten everything I filed regarding this case. And due to the unconstitutional and disproportional revaluation procedures and their taxation, which leads to oath of office violations by municipal officials, plaintiffs request that this honorable court not dismiss the case and affirm the following is required. One would be the Hampton Board of Assessors put immediate procedures in place for ongoing measure and list. A measure and list has not occurred in Hampton since about 2009, 2010, when they actually do the property data checks. Contracted services, they don't have that. MRI is not contracted last time I checked to do that. To include all neighborhoods of the town and not just each area, which seem to be expanding. Procedures should include the 40 to 60% of the properties that were not inspected during the last full measuring list back in the 2008-2010 time period. The second would be that the Hampton Board of Assessors publicly report how many properties have not had a measuring list since 2010. The Hampton Board of Assessors, due to disproportionality and unconstitutionality, disregard the 2024 statistical revaluation and its results, taking all properties back to 2023 assessed values. Obviously, the tax rate going forward would be adjusted for that. The Town of Hampton Board of Assessors, using their statutory authority, abate or credit unfair taxes on resident taxes created from the disproportional and unconstitutional 2024 assessed values. 76:16-C, abatement of resident taxes, gives them the statutory authority to do that. Number 6, the Hampton Board of Assessors going forward take a more proactive and effective role as the assessors of the taxing district to ensure all international, federal, and state laws, statutes, and guidelines are adhered to regarding tax assessments and appraisal standards. One thing, so Article 5, Part 2, I think was referenced by Council. Article 5B, Part 2. I always get confused with Part 2. Pretty sure it's Part 2. 2B.
It's Part 2.
Property taxes current use. So you could argue, Your Honor, that single-family homes that are just living in their home, they don't rent, they don't have an accessory dwelling unit, they haven't sold, are being taxed as if they sold, and according to statutory changes now, as if they were to have an accessory dwelling unit and potentially bring in an income on it. So to me, in my mind, that's two different pieces, but that's just me. So number 7, the New Hampshire State Legislature, now we're just asking that you affirm that this needs to be required. The New Hampshire State Legislature amend due to unconstitutionality RSA 75:1. 8, this court decides on items 1 through 7 prior to the town deliberative session, which is to happen on January 31st, 2026. And any other relief the court deems just proper. Your Honor, I ask that you do not dismiss this case. Any information that you need or would seek from, I'm pretty sure plaintiffs can produce. And we want to thank you for your time.
So I will take a look. I don't know if the town has anything else to add. Do you have anything?
I had a couple of things that I wanted to briefly mention.
Okay.
If you don't mind. There was a claim made related to excess taxes being taken in, and I just wanted to clarify that the tax rate is set by the DRA based on the warrant, based on the spending articles and the budget that is passed by the town. Based on that information, the DRA determines how much tax revenue the town needs to bring in. And then from there, information based on market value, how much that is per thousand. And I'm vastly oversimplifying this, but I just wanted to make it clear that the town is not permitted to raise additional taxes above and beyond what the DRA says it. So even if the market values are off, that doesn't cause a tax surplus for the town. The town raises the taxes. The warrant articles and the town meeting, the town vote, Hampton assessment to the town, authorize it to raise. The other information that we've heard today, in my opinion, provides further support that this is an individual property tax issue. I want to remind the court that SIRA, which is 146 New Hampshire 364, is about the constitutionality of a statewide property tax. So at the time, the state had passed a law saying on top of what the municipalities are collecting for income tax, or for property taxes, excuse me, the state is going to impose its own property tax on top of it, was to help school funding. So as we go through that case, the petitioners in that case did say that the taxation plan under that statewide property tax was unconstitutional under Part 2 or the Constitution. But it is distinguishable from this case in that we were talking about, it was talking about different municipalities, different equalization ratios, and they were able to prove based on those differences that there was not proportionate taxation.
Okay.
When the 2024 revote happened, they came up with preliminary numbers, and just so that the court is aware, they sent a letter to all property owners in the town. There are, and I don't have the exact number, but it's over 10,100 properties in the town. And they each get a letter indicating that they would like to have a conference with MLI or the town, that they should, to talk about the proposed increase for their property, to talk about their tax card, that they should do that. They only get about a 7% response rate to those letters. They keep, they have Zoom calls, they have conferences with people. The concern that this can't be addressed on a property by property basis, it is not supported by what we've discussed. It's not supported by what the town is doing, what the town has done in this taxation process. And if the board has any questions for me about the municipal water reassessment and the subject matter, there's additional questions I can address them. But that is happening, and I would ask the board to dismiss the municipal water reassessment, as well as dismiss any claims for tax abatements when the process under RSA 76 was not followed to file the application to the town.
Thank you. Any final?
Yeah, again, Article 2, Part 2, form of government. Plaintiffs are not government. They're taxpayers that are being overtaxed in some cases. And we wanted to talk about the RICO violation. The reason why that's brought up is in Hampton specifically, we have overtaxing on some residents, right? Which I still argue unrealized gains, taxing on unrealized gains. This taxation without representation is a violation of the U.S. Constitution. Plaintiffs argue that this is financial manipulation and is overtaxing certain property owners. And most of the proceeds in Hampton cases with most towns in New Hampshire, most of that money is going to the schools, the local school districts. It's been proved at town meeting, but most of that, 55%, I think in Hampton, some towns 85%. Well, in Hampton specifically, this would result in racketeer influence and corrupt organizations, also known as the RICO Act violations, because we have 2 selectmen that work and get paid for by the local school district with taxpayer funds. So if any money is overtaxed, and any of that overtaxed money is going to those people, to me, that's how I look at racketeering, which we know first came about because of the mafia, but some of us would argue that the government is just like the mafia. So that's what I have.
Okay.
We put our case forward. We're on the record, which is what we really wanted to do. So we appreciate you. Al, do you have anything you want?
Okay, I'm going to take it under advisement. I do want to say, I'm going to look at the constitutional provisions that have been cited. I'm going to look at the statute. My role I am not a super legislator. I am not the legislature. I'm not the executive branch. I'm a Superior Court judge, and I take that very seriously. So I say that because my role, frankly, is limited by both the Constitution and the statutes, but I'm going to look at everything. I have looked at everything in preparation for today, and I'm going to look at everything again today as far as the legal issues. First thing I'm addressing is the motion to dismiss. I will say that as we hit, it's the 250th birthday of the New Hampshire Constitution, I believe was on Monday, and to have such an engaged citizenry just makes me proud to be a granite stater. So I want to say that I'm applying the law as I see fit, but a record has been made here today, and I just want to appreciate everyone's participation in this process, and I assume everyone participates in your processes as a citizen of this state. So with that, I'm taking under advisement. Thank you, everyone.
Regina in the doorway, chin up, eyes bright. The muckraker smirks, y'all ready to fight. We the people live free or die. Hands in the air, heads held high. These are our roots, this is our plan. You don't take our homes, you don't touch our land. We the people live free or die on this land. They draw their little lines on somebody else's map, try to raise the ground right out from under our shack. But granite runs deep in a New Hampshire spine. You can stack your numbers, you won't cross this line. We the people live free or die. Hands in the air, heads held high. These are our roots, this is our plan. You don't take our homes, you don't touch our land. We the people live free or die on this land. From granddad's stone wall, my daughter's first tree swing. This dirt keeps a promise more than any crown or king. State seal on the letter, lay it right at my door. I'll sign it with a blueprint, say not 1 inch more.